Hello hoppers and welcome. Now, as I'm sure you all know, the new Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom trailer has finally been released. But it's not alone, as it was accompanied by a string of teasers and even a behind the scenes look, all showing various new footage. So, of course, being a big fan of the franchise, I thought it'd be cool to discuss the footage that we have been shown so far. Now, if you haven't seen the trailer yet, I recommend going to do that now and then coming back, because we're going to go straight into the theory and speculation side of things. Kicking it off straight away now with the first scene to discuss. The bar scene. Okay, so the scene that starts off the trailer also starts off my speculation, as we are introduced to a very unamused Owen talking to Claire in what seems to be a bar setting. Now, in this scene, Owen mocks Claire on her companionship choices, even going as far as to question her on who she is currently dating, making it abundantly clear from the get-go that the pair are no longer an item. Now, instantly this irritates me, as they pulled this card in the last film. In Jurassic World, when Claire has her first on-screen interaction with Owen, it is revealed that the pair once went out for a date, and it's implied it didn't end well. This is one of the reasons why there is so much tension between the two characters throughout most of the film. Fast forward, however, to the end of that film, and the pair literally kiss and make up, with Owen even stating we should stick together for survival, therefore confirming that they are now undoubtedly an item. And for the next instalment, what do the filmmakers decide is the natural progression from this? A breakup, of course. What a surprise! So, now we have even more unnecessary tension between our two leads. And what's worse is it's completely pointless, because we know they're going to get back together at the end of the film, it's obvious. So why waste our time with a recycled eye-rolling subplot? It sucks. And yes, of course, there is a chance that they won't get back together, but I'd be very surprised if that ends up being the case. And besides, the bottom line is, it just isn't necessary. We don't need it. Or want it, for that matter. We're here to watch an adventure about dinosaurs, not an episode of frickin' Love Island. Love Island! We just don't need the pointless relationship subplot. They were an item, so just keep them that way. I am genuinely baffled that they have managed to somehow make this same mistake twice now within this franchise. Remember Jurassic Park 3? Stupidly deciding to have Ellie married to some random guy and even mothering his child? What happened to her and Grant? It was an insult to the developments made in the first film. At the start of Jurassic Park, Ellie tells Grant that she would like a child one day, and Grant dismisses the very concept as he doesn't like kids. However, fast forward to the end of the film, and after bonding with the kids, Grant is a changed man. And the smile that he and Ellie share at the end of the film tell us all we needed to know. That one day the pair will start a family. And yet what did the third instalment decide to do? It decided to drop its pants and cack all over the development made within that first film, and instead just making Grant a friend of the family, making sure that he is completely out of the equation. It was universally hated by the fans, and yet here they are, doing it again. And sure, yes, Owen and Claire have nothing on the chemistry and even the likability that Grant and Ellie once had, but the point still stands. They're still coming to the same cack conclusion. But anyway, back to the scene. So yes, from what we can gather from the exchanges of dialogue, this scene will see Claire trying to convince Owen to join a task force to extract the dinosaurs off the ill-fated Isla Nublar, pending a volcano devastation. Now, from what we can gather, Owen is not the least bit interested. He actually seems really down in this scene, and even the mere mention of the dinosaurs seemed to unsettle him. But why? Well, I think I know. And trust me, it's got nothing to do with his and Claire's second breakup. Let me explain. So it has been quite a few years since the events of the last film, and so the characters have definitely been through some changes. Remember, as we've been told before, this is a different Claire, and by the looks of things, a different Owen as well. It would seem that in the years since the events of the last instalment, whilst Claire has been finding herself, it would seem that Owen, in a way, I guess, has been losing himself. Most likely loafing around in self-pity, reminiscing even on the life and the companion that he abruptly had to leave behind. And when I say companion, I'm of course talking about Blue. Because remember, he raised her from birth. He built up a bond with her, with all of his raptors for that matter. And just like a beloved family pet, he had come to care and even love his prehistoric partner. Now, dodgy fanfictions aside, it was a relationship, and he says this much himself in Jurassic World. But all that is gone now. In the blink of an eye, Owen lost everything he had worked so hard to build. The trust, the loyalty, all that potential wasted. So it's completely understandable to assume he wants nothing to do with the place. Because after everything he did, in the end, him and his raptors were just expendable assets. Nothing more. And let's not forget, Owen still has the trauma as well from seeing 3 of his 4 raptors perish before his very eyes. I mean, sure, it's been a few years, but the trauma would definitely still be there. I mean, to put into perspective, imagine watching your beloved pet burnt alive on a furnace, or even blown to pieces by a rocket launcher right before your very eyes. Would you ever forget that? No, of course you wouldn't. I believe that Owen in this film is a broken man. Or, at the very least, a different man. So, with all that in mind, Owen has no intention of getting involved, even stating what could go wrong in a sarcastic, almost mocking tone, because he just doesn't care anymore. He doesn't want to either, because he knows where it ends, in disaster. It's only when Claire mentions Blue still being alive that his interest now shifts, considering the safety of his last surviving raptor. Now, even if you don't agree with my speculation on Owen's mindset in this film, or this scene for that matter, it is still a very interesting scene for us to be given within this trailer because, let's face it pretty much outlines the whole plot of the film for us. It explains why they're going back on the island and what's at stake. It gives us the reason and the motives for going back there, straight off the bat. Claire clearly wants to go to save the dinosaurs from the volcano, possibly feeling a responsibility towards them, as well as to also redeem herself from the last film, as she may still feel bad for the fact that she didn't care for these creatures when she worked at the resort, seeing them as funded assets and not living animals. And of course Owen's motivation seems to be simply reunite with Blue and save her from the catastrophe that's going to take place. It's all put right on the table right from the very start of the trailer. And although I'm glad there is more footage in the trailer, the studio could have easily released just this one scene and nothing else, and we'd still know what kind of film we're walking into. So, a good fast exposition for the trailer, or are they just revealing a little too much too fast? You be the judge. I actually think the biggest question that struck me though when I first saw this scene was, why is the conversation happening in the first place? Why is she trying to take matters into her own hands? Why is she trying to convince Owen to join her when he clearly isn't interested? Well, that brings me on to my next discussion. The hearing scene. Now, this footage seems to depict a government hearing of sorts, discussing whether or not the dinosaur inhabitants of Isla Nublar, to now quote the trailer, deserve the same protections given to other species, or should they just be left to die? Now, assuming this is the same hearing that Ian Malcolm is attending, which, judging by the footage, that seems to be the case, then I actually have a theory explaining not only why Malcolm is there, but also his importance to the plot of the film. Let me explain. In the trailer, Ian Malcolm is seen giving a statement to a board of officials, where he states, "These creatures were here before us, and if we're not careful, they're gonna be here after." Now, this is a very important line, which I'll come back to later, but for now, just bear it in mind. Now, of course, being a hearing, Malcolm would not be the only voice heard. In fact, I actually believe that Claire will be present at the hearing, because of not just her experiences with dinosaurs themselves, but obviously as an employee as well, to the company that helped manufacture them. It is therefore my prediction that Claire will be at the hearing trying to convince the board to greenlight an expedition to the island to save the dinosaurs from another extinction. Possibly even using the underlying theme of the last movie as her defence, that being that the animals are no longer extinct, so therefore they must now surely be given the same rights that any living biological entity possesses. The right to live. However, I also believe that on the other side of this argument is the experienced scientist and mathematician, chaotician, who has not only seen these creatures in containment, but also in the wild, in their natural habitat. I'm of course talking about none other than Dr. Ian Malcolm. And why is Malcolm even at this hearing, you might ask? Well, let me explain. In every single Jurassic Park sequel, it is either mentioned or referenced that Malcolm has been very verbal about his experiences, and of course his predictions surrounding these creatures. So it would make perfect sense that by now he would be regarded, by most, as being the leading and most respected authority on the matter, and would therefore most likely have been summoned by the board themselves as a consultant. In the behind the scenes footage he even jokes, "So I'm here to talk about dinosaurs again," making it clear he is not there by his own accord, but instead that he was summoned to the meeting. And with all that in mind, we now go back to Malcolm's line in the trailer. Malcolm states these creatures were here before us, and if we're not careful they're going to be here after. Now the reason I believe this to be such an important line is because I believe that this is the line of dialogue that essentially loses Claire her entire argument to save them, and therefore forces her to take matters into her own hands, kicking off the plot for the entire film. Because it is such a chilling statement given by Malcolm, the board would surely conclude not long after that the animals would be too much of a risk to keep alive, seen less as a population that can thrive and flourish, but instead as a virus that can spread and consume. Therefore I predict that the decision will be made to leave the animals to their fate. Of course, this is all just speculation, and it's just a theory of mine, but I do believe that the pair will share screen time together in this scene and argue their points. Hell, even the line that Claire speaks in the teaser, "Do you remember the first time you saw a dinosaur?" that could easily be taken from the same scene, maybe even directed at Malcolm himself, trying to sway him, reminding him of the beauty and majesty of these creatures, and not the danger and potential threat that some possess. And as for Malcolm himself, don't get me wrong, I don't think for 1 second that he wants these dinosaurs to be killed. He doesn't want to leave them for dead, but he is just reading the situation based on his calculations, which is something that he does all the time, both in the books and of course in the films. It is part of his character to act this way. He sees that a future with dinosaurs can only mean one without humans, if we are not careful. Even in his delivery of his famous line from the original film, "Life cannot be contained, life breaks free, life finds a way," he sounds deflated and even regretful, almost as if he has been asked a question he doesn't want to answer, such as, "Do they deserve to live?" in which Malcolm would probably respond, "Do we?" There can't be both, not by his calculations. There will never be a balance. We will never be able to contain them no matter what we try. It's like he says, life breaks free, life finds a way. So he isn't being heartless, he's just being as honest and as blunt as he feels he has to be. But anyway, yes, this is just speculation of course, and it could all be completely wrong. However, if it is true, and if Claire is denied her request, if indeed she is the one who makes it in the first place, then it does at least explain the bath scene a little more, and the potential risks that Owen is talking about. Let me explain. In the bath scene, as I mentioned before, Owen states in a sarcastic way what could go wrong when Claire is discussing the plans to take the dinosaurs off the island. Well, in this scene he is clearly expressing his doubts on the safety of the mission. But why would he? These are dinosaurs, not Godzilla. They are not indestructible entities. And if this is a completely kosher mission, with the backing of the government and everything, then surely there'll be hundreds of people fully armed and fully capable of getting the job done, fast and efficiently. And the resources are definitely there, because at the end of The Lost World, there was that never-ending military escort surrounding the SS Venture, the ship transporting the wrecks, just to make sure that it didn't go off course again. All that for one dinosaur. Hell, even in the third film, the Navy and the Marines arrive at Isla Sorna with a frickin' warship full of tanks and armed helicopters, just to be safe. But the less said about that film, the better. Either way, if this is a government operation, then there should be little to nothing to worry about. Or, maybe, just maybe, the real reason Owen is not convinced is because Claire has no backing from the government, because there is no official operation. It's like I said, if my theory about the hearing is correct, she would have been denied her request. Therefore, considering this is the case, she would have to find her own team in order to get the job done. And with all this in mind, everything now starts to make a bit more sense when considering the bar scene. The real reason she is so eager to get Owen on her team is because she needs all the help she can get. And remember, Owen once worked for the Navy, so he's bound to have some connections, some favours that he can call upon to help get the job done. And this would also explain the variety of different people we're seeing in the trailer. Some relatively young and some mercenary types. They are all most likely either environmentalists, volunteers, or just simply hired help. This also makes more sense when you consider the size of the operation, compared to the size of their unit. Granted, what we see in the trailer may not be their entire team, but in order to be scary, you'd have to think there can't be hundreds of people on this island, part of this expedition, or it'd just be a duck hunt. It would be a walk in the park, if you like. It would be too easy. And yes, the Lost World did have a large group of people lurking around the island, but still not hundreds, and besides, their mission only failed because they were sabotaged by Nick, and all their equipment was destroyed by the freed rampaging dinosaurs. Up to that point, they were in full control. They only failed because they were caught off guard by sabotage. They had backup, they just couldn't send for it because their equipment was destroyed. And their control is evident because towards the end of the film, when the helicopters arrive back on the island, they quickly assume control and the male Rex is boarded on the SS Venture. So the point still stands. If there are too many armed people, there is no real sense of danger. And in the trailer, most of these dangerous events we are being shown seem to only be happening with these 3 characters. So, if there are in fact a load of people in their team, then there must be a point where they get separated from the group. Probably during an attack scene, or hell, even the stampede scene. But either way, I don't believe for 1 second that they would voluntarily split up, because that would be a terrible idea. So yes, just to confirm, I don't believe that Claire and Owen have a big extraction team at all. In fact, I believe that their team most likely consists of just the 2 vehicles seen in this shot here. And, maybe a boat offshore somewhere, but that is it. As for the people in this shot, well, I'm not entirely convinced they are even part of the same team. But I'll get back to this later. For now, on to my next point. The Lost World. Now, I hear the word spiritual successor thrown around a lot when discussing the tones and themes of this new movie. And as many have already speculated, the film does seem to bear similarities to that of the second film, The Lost World: Jurassic Park. And despite the film being set on Isla Nublar, and not Isla Sorna, which is where The Lost World actually takes place, I have to admit I can definitely see the resemblance, and why people are saying it. Not to mention that the director has promised a much darker film to that of its predecessor, which is exactly the same path that The Lost World took back in 1997, giving us a more gritty and somewhat gruesome film. However, the similarities don't just end there, as there are many moments in the trailer that are very reminiscent of the second film. The rescue mission, the dinosaur holding pens, hell, even the plot to take the dinosaurs off the island, it all comes straight from The Lost World. And yes, of course there are differences, but the similarities are definitely there. And I believe that there is more to this connection than people might think. Let me explain. When Jurassic World was released in 2015, it was regarded by many, including myself, as a soft reboot. It was a film intended to be the Jurassic Park of this generation, but also a nostalgic nod, an adventure for the already established audience. It was a film that was supposed to cater for both new fans and the old, and for the most part, it did just that. In a lot of ways, it resembled that of the first film, borrowing from its very foundations and plot, but it still changed enough to make it new and somewhat fresh. It was, for lack of a better word, a remake, but one that continued the story rather than replacing it. In other words, a soft reboot. So, if Jurassic World is this generation's Jurassic Park, then surely Fallen Kingdom is this generation's Lost World. And from what we are seeing in the trailers and hearing in rumour, that fact is becoming more and more clear. There is even a rumour that the dinosaurs will reach the mainland at some point in the film. And doesn't that remind you of something? Yeah, exactly. This film doesn't just resemble The Lost World, but it is The Lost World for this new generation. And yes, undoubtedly there will be hundreds of differences to differentiate the films from each other. I mean, they're not even set on the same island for a start, but the basic foundations and plot points are definitely there. Borrowed and reimagined, just like Jurassic World did with the original Jurassic Park. And with all this in mind, we now return to this shot. So as I said before, I'm not convinced one bit that this fairly large crew depicted here in this scene has anything to do with Claire or her extraction team. In fact, I actually have a theory that these mercenaries are working for none other than InGen. I believe that they will be the main antagonists on the island, excluding the dinosaurs themselves, of course, as they set out to extract the assets for their own evil doings. Now, obviously this is all just speculation, but just bear with me here for a second. As you should now be aware, there are countless references and tonal similarities to The Lost World. And just like in any film, the plot of The Lost World follows a path consisting of events that change the course of the story, and therefore create subplots within that story that progresses the film. Let me explain. In The Lost World Jurassic Park, Ian goes to the island with the team in order to rescue Sarah and bring her home. That is Agenda 1, the rescue mission. However, when he gets there is a conflict. InGen are rounding up the dinosaurs to take them back to the mainland. Agenda 2, the InGen conflict. Because of this, Sarah and Nick want to release the dinosaurs from their entrapment. This is Agenda 3, the art of sabotage, which then leads to InGen's equipment being destroyed, which in turn leads them all to be stranded. They all then have to begrudgingly team up to look for a way off the island. This is Agenda 4 with the reluctant team up. So, all of this plot, conflict and character building just because of this one event that started it all. And with all this in mind, we now return to Fallen Kingdom. I theorise that the new film will follow down a similar path of agendas to that of its 1997 counterpart, even leading to that inevitable mainland sequence in the final act. So, here's the theory. Claire puts a team together to try and save the dinosaurs from the ill-fated island. This is Agenda 1, the rescue mission. When the team get to the islands, they quickly discover that they are not the only ones there. InGen mercenaries have already started rounding up the dinosaurs themselves for their own purposes. This is Agenda 2, the InGen conflict. Claire and Owen will then either sabotage the InGen crew by releasing or stealing the dinosaurs, or maybe just the volcano or dinosaurs themselves cause fatal in the integrity of the mission. This is Agenda 3, the art of sabotage. This then leads the teams having no choice but to team up in order to escape the island before the volcano consumes it. This is Agenda 4, the reluctant team up. And of course, as a little bonus, just like The Lost World, I believe that despite the team's best efforts, InGen will undoubtedly take the dinosaurs back to the mainland and all hell will break loose. Doubtably a city this time round though, but instead most likely the mansion we are shown in the trailer, as shots like this do suggest a dinosaur attack taking place there. But of course it's all just a theory, and granted there isn't much evidence as of yet to suggest that there is actually two different teams on the island. However, that being said though, there are certain moments in the trailer that could hint at such a conflict actually taking place. As in this scene, both Owen and Claire seem surprised upon opening the container and seeing the sedated Tyrannosaur. Yes, that could be them looking in both awe and maybe fear, but personally I think it's more of a shock and surprise, like they can't believe InGen have already boxed up the Rex, for example. I just feel that they wouldn't be, A, looking at the animal this way if it was their team were the ones to have caught it, and B, they wouldn't be alone with it in the first place unless they were not, supposed to be there. They just seem like they're up to no good, like they're snooping around. Owen even says, this is going to be awesome. What does he mean by that? Are they going to release the Rex, or are they at the very least going to steal it, transport the creature back to their own team? Or maybe, just maybe, this dialogue is taken completely out of context. Hell, maybe this scene takes place when they're back on the mainland with the animals. But who knows, the possibilities seem endless for this scene. But yes, for me personally, just like The Lost World Jurassic Park had two teams with different morals and agendas, I believe that Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom will follow in its footsteps. The new film is clearly borrowing so much tonally from the second film, it just makes sense to have this added conflict, and one that made the second film so interesting. And this is a conflict that I actually feel the film would benefit from, as opposed to the failing romance between our two leads, which, let's face it, no one cares about. But anyway, if this theory of mine is proven to be true, then it begs another question entirely. If InGen are the ones wanting to take the dinosaurs back to the mainland, then what about Claire's team? What's their endgame? Well, as one last reference to The Lost World, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if at the end of the film we went back to sauna. Well, hoppers, that just about does it for part 1. As you can see, I'm going into as much detail as possible, and in order to do this, it does require a bit more time, of course, than the standard video. But, that being said, you can expect to see part 2 very soon, where I'll finally be discussing the dinosaurs we have seen in the trailer, as well as the dinosaurs that we haven't. Not to mention even more theories and speculation to quench your prehistoric thirst. And now that the hectic festive period is far behind us, these videos are going to be much more frequent. So please be sure to leave a like and of course subscribe, so therefore you don't miss any of the new content. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I have. Take care, hoppers, and I'll see you next time. Also, I'm just going to call this right now. Could that possibly be Kelly, of all people, lurking in the background there? You know, Ian Malcolm's daughter from none other than The Lost World, Jurassic Park. You know, it definitely fits the theme of paying tribute to the second film, and it would make perfect sense for her to be there supporting her father. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. She definitely doesn't look like she's part of the crowd, or a reporter for that matter. You know, her clothes look very distinct compared to everyone else, and the way she's positioned in the shot definitely looks like she's, you know, possibly just waiting for him to finish his statement so that they can go. Anything, who knows? But anyway, I guess it's only a matter of time before we find out.